So we had the Open Source Summit and Linux Plumbers last week. Both conferences were extremely interesting from my point of view and from anybody, I think, working with Android. So I know some of the people on the call I recognize were at the summit, but I think probably most of you weren't. So I want to give you a little bit of feedback as to the sessions that were there and my impression of some of the things we talked about. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the OSS, the Open Source Summit. This is a picture of, well, this is the river. This is River Danube. This is the bridge over it. The conference center is actually not in this picture at all. It's actually somewhere behind this big building. But I like that picture anyhow. You can't really tell, but if you look closely, the river is really quite turbulent because there's a lot of water flowing down it right now. Anyhow, if you want to know more about it, you can click on this link here when I load the slides, which I haven't yet done, but I will do tomorrow. So starting off then with the OSS, there is an embedded track, an embedded Linux track at OSS. And within that, there is an Android track. So I've filtered out just really the four Android relevant Android related talks. And I'll just briefly give you a quick intro to each one. You click on the links to find out more. So the first one was how to enable Android on your developer board by Matthias from Baylibra. And this is a really good board bring up presentation. He's using the Beagle Play, which uses a TI chip as an example board. And he's kind of going through it bit by bit. How do you get to get the initial prompt on the console? How do you go to the next stage and get the framework to start booting up? Or base issues with the various partition layouts you required for Android and so on. It's a really good from first principles doing a board bring up for Android. The next one, how did you cook it about Honda's Android automotive-based IVI system? This was really, really good. There's a lot of detailed stuff about how Android automotive fits in IVI. Once you get past the first few slides are all about Honda's internal workflow, which from my point of view, at least, it wasn't all that interesting. But once you get past that, it is a really good presentation in that it gives you a lot of useful information about Android automotive. Next one, the DevBoards community for Android. So Amit Pundia, who has given a talk on here before, he gave a really good talk about where do we get the board support packages for the various Android dev boards. And so he's put together a location for doing this. And as start off, he's got several Qualcomm boards, the RB3 and the RB5, if you're familiar with those, plus the Vim 3 and another one which I've forgotten the name of. So Amit's basic idea here is to provide a place where board support packages for Android can be hosted. And then Annalena and Stefan from Innovex gave a really good talk about Perfetto, tracing and debugging, not only in Android, actually, but also in Yocto. So don't forget, guys and girls, you can use Perfetto outside of Android. The next bit then, I want to talk a bit about the BOF, the Birds of the Feather meeting that I ran. Unfortunately, for various circumstances, there was no video of this. However, a really helpful member of the audience made a recording of this. The quality is not good enough to actually put it online, I don't think, but you can just about make out what people are saying. So what I've done is, and I've done this because this is highly relevant, I think, to what we're talking about in this group. So I've given you just a very quick, in 4 slides, idea of what we were talking about. So this is the thing that I keep on talking about, community. So first of all, then we talked about the AOSP community, of which we are part right now. So Amit Pundio mentioned that we have several things. He mentioned the AOSP developers community. If you are not familiar with that, you really should be. It gives you a chat channel. Basically, there's a matrix channel where people discuss all kinds of Android AOSP things. Of course, we have also the this meetup, and I've also added the link that Amit added or mentioned rather for the dev boards for Android idea. So then Andreas mentioned, why is it after 15 years of Android, why is community a problem? Why are there no communities? Or why are there a lot of communities actually, but not connected to each other? So my response to that is that it's really down to a lack of focus. So we have lots of little attempts, little communities, but there needs something to kind of focus on. Sherburn, who is there, mentioned that in the past, there perhaps hasn't been such a need for a community. People coming in, ASP developers come along, they download AOSP, they hack it around a bit, they ship a product, and then they forget about it. So in the past, we didn't really require so much engagement with community. Things are changing. The main thing, well, 2 things actually. The thing that Sherburn mentioned is regulation. So the various regulation coming out of the EU and various other regions means that in the future, you can't just make a device and ship it and forget about it. There are requirements, legal requirements, that you maintain the device and you do updates at a certain frequency. So all of a sudden, all these device manufacturers, which includes vehicles, have a regulatory need to update their software, which means that they need to have, well, there's more of a need for a community to help them do that. And I would like to add that a little bit about automotive. I think automotive is a special case because there is more regulation when it comes to automobiles than there is to almost anything else. So I think the automotive industry is probably more interested in community than most people. David Brasdell mentioned that as an example of how Google does interact with the community. Have a look at the GKI, the generic kernel image. And this is a really good example of how the Android developers have interacted with upstream open source projects, in this case, the Linux kernel, to produce to give an effect basically which combines the best of what Google can do with the best of what open source can do. And Matthias mentioned also that the DM Hardware Composer external module is another good example of this. So that then took us on to talking about contributing. So one of the ideas of, well, one of the essential things about a community is that you can contribute to the upstream, which in this case is AOSP. And we talked a little bit about the problems of doing this. So if you want to upstream your patches to AOSP, you can do that via a request via Gerrit and various other things. First of all, we had a bit of a discussion about the need to agree to a CLA, a contributor license agreement, before you can contribute any, or before you can even make your first patch available via Gerrit. And we had something of a debate about whether CLAs are a good idea or not. I did a little bit of checking about on this, and it seems that contributor license agreements are fairly common with open source projects. And I haven't analyzed the CLA you have to go through for AOSP, but so far as I know, it's not particularly onerous. At least nobody out there is jumping up and down saying don't do it. So in my opinion, the CLA thing is a little bit of red herring. It's just a thing that you have to do. The bigger obstacle is that if you want to upstream stuff, you need to get 2 reviewers from Google, basically, to OK your change before it can get accepted upstream. And that is the hard bit. Somebody mentioned that some projects are, or some parts of AOSP are easier to upstream. So the system library, sorry, the core system is easier to do. Also the bootstrap, I seem to remember. I'm slightly forgetting what I said here. But everybody agreed that trying to upstream stuff into the framework directory, for example, is much, much harder. So probably not worth trying. And then we got to talking about this idea, which kind of was follows on from what Amit Pundia was saying. Maybe the answer is to have a place to host out-of-tree code. And so Amit is doing something with board support packages with his dev force for Android thing. Maybe we could build on that. Maybe that's the right thing to do. And I'd like to well, I'd like to widen this discussion out when I finish this presentation, if anybody's interested here. But this is something I feel quite positive about. Then the next topic we talked about is where do you get information about AOSP? So David said, go to Michel Rahman. Well, Michel Rahman gave a talk on here 2 or 3 sessions ago. Yeah, I second that. Michel has a very good understanding of how Android works, and he's very accessible. Another great idea then is you can actually subscribe to projects within Gerrit. And if you do that, the system will alert you whenever there are commits there. And so you get alerts whenever the system changes, which is great stuff. Somebody mentioned boot camps. So particularly with Android Automotive, I think once per year they hold a boot camp, and maybe with other parts of Android as well, I'm not so sure. And in the boot camps, you have access to the Android developers, and they will tell you about the work they've been doing and API changes and all kind of wonderful stuff. The big problem I have with boot camps, however, is that you do need to sign an NDA. Because some of the information that they give there is commercially sensitive, which kind of means that once you sign the NDA, you can't tell anybody about what you've just learned. And since my interest is about education and spreading information, that kind of makes the whole thing a little bit pointless. So boot camps, great idea, but they are too restrictive to be useful, in my opinion. And then the final topic, which came right at the very end, Amit and others mentioned that when you're doing a board bring up, the problem with doing a board bring up on Android is that if you just dive straight in and try and build the entire, try and configure the whole thing at once, you end up with a horrible mess of bits and pieces. So Amit was kind of emphasizing, echoing the thing that Matthias was talking about. You don't have to build the entire system. You can just build a RAM disk image and boot that, and that will give you a console and prove that your kernel boots and that your system boots. And you can build a RAM disk image in a few minutes rather than in the few hours that it takes to build the entire system. it would be really great to have to delve into that a little bit more, and I may talk to Amit and/or Matthias to put together a little talk about that. How do you build a minimal booting Android system? So that's the BOF. So that's a quick brain dump as to the kind of stuff we talked about there. And I'd like to cycle back at the end of this to talk a little bit about the community stuff again. And then a quick intro to Linux Plumbers. So if you're not familiar with Linux Plumbers or LPC, the basic idea of it is to get kernel developers and people working just above the kernel together and talk about stuff. Yeah, skip it a bit. So I'm just going to pick out the two bits that I found interesting, which just happened to be the two bits that I was giving talks at. So first of all, I was talking about the AOSP build system. So we all know this really well. It's the Soong and Kati and stuff. And I did a talk there, really comparing the AOSP build system with Open Embedded and Yocto, and doing a mapping between the two. You can see my slides at that link. You can kind of see the video. Oops. There is an unedited video that should be in. And so what they do is that they make available immediately the live stream as a video. So you can go click, you will be able to go and click on this link. It is basically just a video of the entire day in that particular room. So the build system microconference was the second part of the day in the afternoon. So you have to jump 5 hours and 35 minutes to see the start. And I was one of the first, well, I was the first to talk. So I'm at 5 hours and 39 minutes in. Yeah, so go look at that if you're interested in that stuff. Quick summary of that. In my opinion, the solution to the AOSP build problems would be to switch to using Yocto. And I have a list of reasons why that would work. I'm not suggesting that I'm going to do it, but hey, it would work. Then we had the Android microconference. And again, I'm just giving a quick list of all the things that we talked about here. So we talked about, again, longevity, support, longevity, maintainership, community were the first three topics. So general things, which I want to come back to in a little while. And then I'm not going to dwell too much on these, but you can of course, go look at these presentations. They're all wonderful presentations. So first of all, the idea of using a generic bootloader for Android based on UEFI would make life a lot easier. I don't think I can add anything to the generic DMA heap talk. Memconfig, again, I don't think I was really paying attention when that was on, so you'll have to go and read the slides. 16 KB support. So this is switching from 4K pages to 16K pages, which makes the memory management more efficient in some cases. Zero copy IO and large folios on Oppo Android phones. Other notes TBD. Okay, right. That's as far as we got. So that is, this is a brain dump. I apologize for that. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, some of which maybe we'll talk about in a future meetup. From my point of view, the most exciting thing was talking with people about this idea of some kind of community. And I really hope that we can grow something out of this meetup group into something that can be that can encompass a few more things. So that's all I have to say, I think. Does anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts? Anybody who's there?